AR London.
Good evening to you and welcome to Voice of Africa Radio. It's 5 minutes after 7 o'clock. Today, the 8th of June 2015. You still tune into Voice of Africa Radio. You welcome back from the news at 7. We are starting with your favorite socio-political talk show. Inside with me in the studio is Helen Peterson from Tusk. She's in the studio with me this evening. Isai Tamil Solidarity also in the studio, and Mahmoud Faiz, Liberal Democrat, Leighton and Wanstead, also a human rights activist, specialist in Southern Asia. I will be joined by Limbid Opek, who will be joining us via the phone from Central London to talk about important issues that really matter most. A professor at Coventry University has stated that to have a referendum and to win a referendum by any government is to have it done as early as possible when there is a political honeymoon, or else it will go otherwise, urging Mr. Cameron to go ahead with his promise in-out referendum on the British participation or British in European Union. But this has sparked a whole lot of controversies within the Conservative Party. As a decade ago, Mr. Cameron was elected to lead the Conservative Party to halt this banging of the largest drum within Conservative as to their involvement or the British involvement with the European Union, or British being part of the European Union. Conservative Party as a political party has been divided so far with this principle of Britain being part of the European Union. We will be discussing this in depth on Voice of Africa Radio, as well as the person of Charles Kennedy, once the most successful Liberal Democrat leader after war in Great Britain. He was able to manage the party for the party to win more seats in Westminster. And in 2005, his own people said, enough of your leadership. We would want to have another leader. And he was the only person that stood or that did not vote for Mr. Clegg to join the coalition. And on his principle, Charles Peter Kennedy, one of the most effective and most influential liberal ideologist and politician in Great Britain, has his demise started the demise of liberalism in British politics, or the liberal view in British politics is also dead. To do this with me will be Limbid Opek, former MP Liberal Democrat, Helen Peterson, as I stated earlier on. Mahmoud Faiz is also in the studio, Liberal Democrat Leighton and Wanstead, and also a human rights activist on Voice of Africa Radio. But before we start with our main topics today, let me go to Tamil Solidarity. Isai is in the studio with me. Isai, in regards to Janahan, a political asylum seeker in Great Britain. We all know we have the spirit of the compassion, and we defend and protect individuals who are being persecuted or who flee from for their life into the United Kingdom. Janahan was arrested in Sheffield Home Office and was due to be deported back to his home country, whereby we know the Tamil targets are under persecution. But from a reliable source, he's been released. So why are you still protesting on behalf of what should the British government do for this man whose life is in danger, and they want to deport him back to his home country?
Thank you. I wanted to begin by saying a bit about Tamil Solidarity. And Tamil Solidarity is a grassroots campaign and we stand up for the rights of all workers and all oppressed people in the world. And Janahan is our young member. He's 22 years old only, and he went to. He's an asylum seeker, and he has been politically active in Sri Lanka, and he had to escape. But he's also a torture victim individual. I mean, if you see, his whole body is full of burns and bruises, and it's evident of all that. And so he escaped from Sri Lanka and came here to save his life. And on last Monday, when he went to sign on, the Home Office detained him, and the way they did that was totally inappropriate, because they really never gave him a proper chance to explain himself. His case was never properly heard, but also his mental status, because he'd been severely affected by the war. He has like PTSD as well, post-traumatic stress disorder, and all of this was not taken into consideration, and they put him into detention camp in a place where he was previously detained and tried to commit suicide. So it's totally insensitive in that sense. And so we have taken up a campaign, because his life is in danger if he's returned back to Sri Lanka, but also his life was in danger with him being in that detention camp, or in any detention camp.
Has his case been heard by a judicial court in the United Kingdom?
His case was meant to be heard on July the 15th, and they didn't really give him any opportunity. They detained him before that. So no, his case wasn't properly heard, and new evidences have all been submitted which wasn't really reviewed, and no consideration was taken in that sense. But because it was all very sudden, so we campaigned very strongly to get him out of detention camp, and we've only been able to do that because of the support we received from a lot of human rights activists, a lot of trade unionists, a lot of campaigners that came forward and gave their support. But because of this campaign that we did, he's now a well-known person in terms of the media in Sri Lanka. So his photos, his news. So
you believe that if British government deports him to Sri Lanka, his life will be at stake, or he wouldn't get justice in Sri Lanka? So they should grant him his asylum status in the United Kingdom. Is that what you believe?
Well, I say that yes. I say that his life should be. They can't give him a death sentence by returning him back to Sri Lanka, where he would be, his life would be in danger, and that's for sure. So they do have to save someone's life, and I think any country has a responsibility to save a human life. So I would say on that basis, yes.
Well, you still tune into Voice of Africa Radio. That is Isai from Tomo Solidarity on behalf of Janahan, a young man who was detained by British immigration, and gracefully he's been released now pending hearing. I'll come back to you, but before I come back to you, good evening to you, Limbid, and thank you for joining us on Voice of Africa Radio.
It is always a pleasure to be on your program. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you very much once again. The demise of Charles Kennedy, one of the most successful after war Liberal Democrat leader. Has his demise begun to have effect on liberalism in the British politics?
I think that the damage was done to liberalism by the previous leadership, by Nick Clegg and the group of people who helped to get rid of Charles Kennedy in 2006. Charles Kennedy's death is in some ways a tragic symbol of what's happened to some extent to the party. If we think about it, there was a takeover bid about 10 years ago by a group which Nick Clegg was a member of, and they wanted to change the party into something, in my opinion, that would get them power. I believe there was no coherence in the group. I don't think that they were based on a liberal ideology. That's where things started to go wrong. The fact Charles Kennedy was ousted was, in my view, part of the warning sign things were changing. Where are we now? Well, it is tragic. I knew Charles Kennedy well, and I was very sad, particularly at the weekend over this. But the party and liberalism will recover. It will take a long time. David Steele, a former leader, said it would take decades for things to improve. You might be right. But the thing about liberalism is the party's leadership walked away from liberalism. Liberalism has never walked away from the United Kingdom. And I hope that over time, Liberal Democrats, real Liberal Democrats, not pretend ones, will actually be in government again.
But until 1999, Charles Kennedy himself wasn't a liberal Democrat. He was a social democrat. So from these two experiences, from a social democrat to liberal democrat, to bring the Liberal Party to the state at which his own people couldn't solidarize with him until they let him go. They ousted him to let Semien Kambu became the leader before Clegg succeeded him and sent the party to coalition whereby you were taken to the abattoir and slaughtered by the Conservative. What is your account to all these events happening within the Liberal Democrats?
In my judgment, there are three phases that you've described there. The first phase was Charles Kennedy's own leadership. He was, as you said a few minutes ago, the most successful Liberal Democrat leader in the history of the party. He built the party to 62 MPs, quite an achievement. And at the height of his success in 2006, he had taken the party to a position of great credibility in British politics. End of phase one. Phase two begins when Charles Kennedy is pushed out on the basis of his drinking. People say Charles Kennedy cannot lead the party because he's incapable of doing so, ignoring the fact that the World War II was won in large part by a man who was an alcoholic, essentially an alcoholic, and that was Winston Churchill.
Alcoholic and a chain smoker.
And a chain smoker as well. And he was unquestionably affected by alcohol when he was the Prime Minister. And yet no one said that Winston Churchill should have been pushed out. So phase two begins by, in my view, a cynical approach by Nick Clegg and others to push Charles Kennedy out, even though we could have changed the way this country talks about alcoholism, not as a choice, but as a condition, an illness like multiple sclerosis or pneumonia, not a choice that would cause you to have to lose your job in the way that Charles Kennedy did. And I stress again, he had delivered the results. There was no question about that. So phase two begins then. And that phase two continues until Nick Clegg becomes the leader. Then we get into phase three, the catastrophic phase. I wrote a book in 2011 saying that if Nick Clegg carried on leading the party would end up in a terrible state in the general election of 2015. Why? Because all of the evidence showed that this third phase was going badly wrong because Nick Clegg couldn't lead the party in a liberal and a democratic way, in the way that I would define those things. Well, phase three came to an end on the 7th of May 2015 with disaster, with a bigger disaster than even I had predicted. And of course, as I wrote down 4 years ago, I said Nick Clegg could not possibly be the leader the day after the general election. So now into a new phase. We have a leadership election between one man who was part of the Nick Clegg team, that's Norman Lamb, and another man who was outside the Nick Clegg team and attacked by the Nick Clegg team. That's Tim Farron. I think Tim Farron ought to win, and he probably will win. If he doesn't, then the party is in a lot of trouble. If he does win, then the slow rebuilding begins. But I do not underestimate how much time that will take. The party is in a weak state and in a financially very difficult state too. Even though lots of people have joined the Liberal Democrats over the last few weeks now that Nick Clegg's gone, it still has a huge mountain to climb.
Well, Limbido Peck, we will come back to you, but Mahmoud Faiz is also in the studio, Northern, as you are talking your way through. Mahmoud is fan of Nick Clegg, and he thought maybe Nick Clegg could have done better. Mahmoud, now Charles Kennedy, the most successful, maybe he even brought you into the party.
Something. I'm a member of the Liberal Democrat Party. I'm not part of any particular leadership team. That's not how I look at things. We don't pick sides. We think what's best for the people of Britain. But just before I get onto that, if you could let Domi talk about the Tamil Solidarity Campaign. Although I'm from Kashmir, I'm not from Tamil, but that doesn't mean that our fight's not the same. The Tamil fight, the Kashmiri fight, the Sikh fight, all of these people, all of these nations that are being tortured right across the globe, whether it be Middle East or the East or Asia, it's not just your fight. This is our fight as well. And we have to fight together, unite together, and campaigning together shows what we can achieve. This young man is clearly, for evidence from his body, was tortured. If he gets back, we've seen how much 80,000 Tamil people were killed by the Sri Lanka government. Come on, do you really trust that government to give him a fair trial? Where's the Home Office coming from? What world are they living in? Let's play something. Let's put the human element back into humanity, and give people refuge from whatever part of the world they are, whatever religion they are, whatever sex they are.
We hope he's been released now, so maybe we hope the British government will reconsider his decision. The Home Office will reconsider his decision. British government will only
consider if we all stand together and campaign for and make a strong voice for the people, not only for the people of Tamil, people of Kashmir, Sikh people persecution from Libya, from Syria, all of these. Yeah.
Well, now we're talking about the Liberal Democrat here, the leader of the party, the ex-leader of the party, the man that brought you from had 66, almost 60 or 60 or so MPs for you, that you did not consider his state of mind and you ousted him out of the party just like that to bring in the people that you think they can deliver. He's gone now, and what is...
well, Charles Kennedy, there was just 2 years difference between me and Charles Kennedy in sense of age, and it's really gut-wrenching when I think that he's no longer with us. Whether he was a backbench MP or a leader, he made such a difference, not only to the Liberal Party but British politics overall. As you rightly said, he was a Liberal Democrat from 1999 to 2006, but actually came in as a member of in 1998 of the SDNP, which was the breakaway from the Labour Party. And yes, you're absolutely right. He was a great leader, a great person of courage and conviction.
May I say the Liberal Democrat leadership let him down, because when he was there in need of your support to fight his alcoholism, you intend to use that as grounds to kick him out of leadership role, whereas you knew the man was doing wonderful for the party.
Well, man was doing wonderful for the party, and alcoholism, I've always said, not only today now on this program, that we should never treat anybody alcoholic. We should see it as a illness and work with the person rather against the person. But politics is a very ruthless game. It's not us that make decisions, it's the general public that make decisions. We've seen some very good leaders in all parties sometimes, and we could, as political pundits, we see them as excellent, but suddenly the general public will not vote for them. Can be because of their age or because of this or that or their background or anything. So politics is a very cruel game, and I'm afraid that is how it is.
Yes, Helen, alcoholism and politics. Tony Blair ever confessed that he was hugely drinking. He was drinking massively when he was still a prime minister. His advisor, Alistair Darling, was also having problems with alcohol. Did that affect their state of mind in government?
I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. What I do know about, and this is obviously different to Charles Kennedy being an alcoholic, which it is right what people are saying about it being an illness. What there is, though, in Parliament is it's a boys' club and there's a massive drinking culture. Now, whether that did or did not exist, people who suffer from alcoholism, would have suffered, because it is an illness. But there is a massive problem with the drinking culture, I think, in Parliament, which is separate from what happened to Charles Kennedy, because it was an illness. But I oppose that that idea. I mean, things like the SNP have been complaining about how it's a boys' club in there, that all the business happens around the bar in the subsidised bars, where, you know, taxpayers are paying for the MPs to get cheap alcohol, rather than it happening in public, in the streets. Now, that is separate issue to what happened to Charles Kennedy.
Let me go to Lembit. Lembit, should we put this on a table to discuss and debate that if somebody is suffering from alcohol intake, if somebody becomes an alcoholic, that doesn't affect his state of mind, and for that matter, any position or leadership role that he is playing, he should be given the necessary support, as Charles Kennedy himself said that he sought for professional help and he has gained it. Therefore, he believes that the party could have stood behind him to go through it. Should we make this as a debate to know the consequences of some of the things that we do in politics?
Yes, I think that is exactly what we should do. My judgment is that when Charles Kennedy was very honest and I think courageous by discussing his drink problem, we could have changed the life for millions of people in the UK. Charles was offering, I spoke to him about this at the time, and I said, why don't you make this a public matter and then act as a role model for millions of people in this country who live directly or indirectly with the problems of alcoholism. And he was doing that. We could have changed the entire debate. But oh no, people who wanted him out just pushed him out regardless of that. And that was pretty close to unforgivable to me. And so what would I do? Well, there are loads of people who drink more than the recommended amount in Westminster. I go to the bar there quite often, and frankly, I'm sure many of them drink more than the recommended maximum unit. That shouldn't be the measure. The measure is, number one, can you do the job? Number two, if you have the problem, can there be a support structure, which means you can still do your job well and get help, as you would with a paralysis or a disease or an illness. When I broke my back, I wasn't right for about a year, and so people were forgiving of that. What should actually happen? Well, as you suggested, Tony Blair admitted he was drinking very heavy. Margaret Thatcher was an alcoholic. Used to be on gin all the time, I think it was. But I met her when she was still in politics and she was drunk. So, where do you draw the line? My view is the unforgivable mistake in the whole thing was that people's personal ambition prevented that dialogue from taking place. I don't blame them for his death, but I do think that the Liberal Democrats were partly destroyed by the selfishness of the party which said it cared about mental health issues in the 2015 election, but abandoned the man with a mental health issue because he was honest enough to admit it.
While you still tune into Voice of Africa Radio, 27 minutes after 7 o'clock on Voice of Africa Radio, this is Inside discussing these two important issues. Mr. Cameron made a promise that he would let Britain have its say in the membership of Britain in the European Union. Now, 2017, we will be having a referendum, in-out referendum. And the Prime Minister is in Germany, G7, and he's saying afterwards there will be a renegotiation of British participation in any European endeavors. And for that matter, whatever he's going to renegotiate will be in the interest of Great Britain. Lembit, do we know what the Prime Minister, the points that he's going to renegotiate on behalf of Great Britain? Is it known to us?
No, it's not. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it's so obvious that we have no idea what he's trying to do, really, because he's got himself into a mess. I don't think he expected to be the Prime Minister right now. So he made all these promises in the general election, and he has just got such huge problems. Even the American president seems to be trying to help him now. And then he's made it worse. So number one, the answer to your question, Adam, is I don't really know what he's going to claim as a success. If he doesn't get controls on immigration, which is more or less what many in his party want, and he can't get that, then he's in trouble. Secondly, he's made it even worse now by making it sound like he was going to fire anyone in his cabinet who wasn't on his side. Then today, instead of saying that he misrepresented something, He's blamed the media. Big mistake. The media are just laughing at him now. So Cameron, I quite like him as a person, but I think he's got an impossible problem, and everything that he's saying at the moment plays into the hands of the no vote in his own party and in UKIP. And if I was in UKIP, I would be rubbing my hands, because this is the time that UKIP can really get their referendum campaign and the no campaign going.
Well, Helen, now we are part of the European Union. Everything, the institutions, educational institutions are saying Britain cannot get out of European Union because science exchange program with the European exchange program, businesses and commerce, getting out of European Union is going to cost us a lot. And now we have a prime minister who is going to renegotiate some of the European, he's going to for a renegotiation, but we don't know what he is putting on the table or what he is going to renegotiate on behalf of the British people. In-out referendum. Do you believe that Britain, when 2017, we would vote to stay within the European Union, or based on what we heard before the elections, would make people vote no and get out of the European Union?
Well, firstly, the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition don't have a position on the EU. We've been standing in the local elections and the general election, haven't gotten to the point where we've discussed what position we're going to take on the EU, because we're new and things like that. But I'm part of one of the constituent parts of the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition. It's actually a coalition from the Socialist Party, and we have made that, discussed that. But the thing about what Cameron said, firstly, that he's going to renegotiate on the basis of the best thing for people in Britain. When has him or his government ever done anything positive for the majority of people in society? This is a government of austerity, a second government of austerity, who implemented the bedroom tax, £9,000 fees, huge attacks on benefits, on people's living standards. He's not negotiating anything for the benefit of the majority of people in Britain. He's negotiating for the benefit of big business, his friends in the cabinet. You know, maybe he'll get some good deals for the MPs who have, own something in the NHS that's been privatised. Let's get it straight. He's not doing it for the majority, for the better standard of living.
But that is what he has made us to understand, that he's going to renegotiate on behalf of Great Britain, and he'll make sure that all negotiations will benefit the entire British people. So what are some of the things that he's going to renegotiate, with the exception of immigration?
Like I said, I don't think that that's true. That's words coming out of his mouth. The reality is he's a Tory, and the Tory government and this Tory government will be absolutely disaster for the majority of people in society. And so anything he negotiates, I do not think will benefit the majority of people in society. It will carry on benefiting big business and his friends in big business. So we shouldn't believe that lie that that's what he's going around the EU, who he's representing when he's going around speaking to people in the EU. He's going around representing big business and his friends in big business.
Well, Mahmoud, now Mr. Cameron is making it, and the renegotiation is what we are waiting for. But already we know 2017 we will have the referendum. Yes, you want to belong to the EU. Yes, if you don't want, no. Nigel Farage has said that they would fiercely campaign on behalf of no, that they wouldn't want the British
good switch of policy if Nigel Farage turn around and say yes. Then I would love to see that.
They wouldn't want to be part
You'd
of
have to
the
pick me off the
European
floor
Union.
with a kiss of life.
About 50 Tory MPs, backbenchers, are also saying that if the negotiation that the British government is doing is not in favour of them, for Westminster to have their laws overriding the European Court of Justice law, then they would support the no campaign and vote for no, so that people in Britain will get out of the European Union. Do you think that this will help this country if we are out, or we are going to get a fair deal by our Prime Minister?
Well, I mean, how do you describe a fair deal? I mean, saying renegotiate on what? He hasn't told you what his starting point is. He hasn't told you what his end point is. He could come back and say, yeah, free negotiate, I've got everything I want. But from what? For who? He hasn't told you what he's renegotiating, to what extent, to what policies. He hasn't told anything. This is a bluff. This is nothing more than appeasing, keep quiet the old school
But
boys.
before the
to say
election, he
Britain
said
is an
that there
island
should
on
be
its own.
some duration, a time before somebody from any member state of the European Union coming into the United Kingdom to benefit from taking income support or benefit any sort of benefit.
Well, mainly we've had party that propagate sort of different cultures and go along and play into the sort of racist sort of card really, or people of that school of thought about immigrants coming over and claiming unemployment benefit and that. What they haven't told you is that 3 times as many British people claim unemployment in Europe than Europeans claim in Britain. So what will happen to us our British people in France, in Germany, in Switzerland, in Italy, in all of these countries? We will lose 3 times as much than we got. So 3 times as far big we lose if that is stopped. This immigration, as I've said before this program, I continue to say, is not a problem. It's a problem created by politicians. And on the left and the right wing, one will say we stand for immigration, this, all this, and the other will say we're anti-immigration, this. When in matter of fact, if you look throughout history, this country is built by immigrants, just like one of the greatest countries in the world is. America is built by immigrants. Tell me one country in the world that's actually been ruined by immigration. Name one.
Well, Limbert, now that we've got some members of the Conservative Party saying that if the negotiation by the Prime Minister did not go in favor of them, they would support the no campaign. What is the state of the Tory in as much as this division amongst them with regards to the membership of Great Britain to the European Union?
I don't know for sure, but I'm willing to make a guess. In my opinion, about 50% of the Conservative Party would be very happy to leave the European Union. Maybe I'm wrong, but I get that feeling privately. They are cautious, but that's because they don't want to harm their chances of promotion in the organisation. What's really interesting is how this develops, because a lot of it depends on the mood music which the Prime Minister can create. And I would agree with your socialist panelists today. The Conservatives don't tend to look out for the poor. They tend to look out for big business in themselves. So there'll be a pressure from those big businesses that want to trade in Europe and think it's bad to leave to stay in. And there'll be a pressure from particularly small businesses that don't like the regulation, that want to leave and are supporting the Tory party and want to pull out. I personally think that this is completely out of David Cameron's hands now. He has made promises he can't keep. He can't have a serious renegotiation. Something will go wrong in Greece. The economy could collapse in the European Union. And in 2017, people will say, we've had enough of this, and we'll just pull out. I think that Cameron's entire prime ministership will now be defined by the European question, to be honest with you. And it's his own fault.
Now, the Foreign Secretary has stated that if any big negotiation would take place, then they must have a treaty change, European EU treaty change. And do you think that the European Union will have a treaty change for the sake of British renegotiations?
No, I don't think it's going to happen. I think there could be some tiny changes, but ultimately, the rest of the European Union will behave the same way in this debate as they behave in the Eurovision Song Contest. Nobody votes for the UK in the Eurovision Song Contest. No one's really going to vote for the UK in the European Union. A few will. Angela Merkel will be concerned, maybe some other nations, but on the whole, people will say if the UK wants to go, they're nothing but trouble. Let's just get rid of them anyway.
Well, Helen, if UK wants to leave the European Union and it wouldn't get support, somebody holding the leg to say, please stay in, they will say, take your troubles and go. How well would it be for the British people if we are not part of the European Union, the common trading bloc?
I think whatever happens, in or out, in 2017 or whenever they decide to hold it, we're going to have continued austerity. We've got austerity now, we've got big protests, there's a big protest coming up in a few weeks' time. People are really suffering, people are using food banks, things like this, and we're having to fight. We're in the fight of our lives, really, against a government that's extremely ruthless and feels like it has the right to be, even though they got only 24% of the vote. But the thing is, there's negative attacks that have come and are coming through the EU as well. Things like TTIP, the idea that when services that have been privatised are renationalised, you'd have to pay the company. It's part of TTIP, it's not actually what everything TTIP has in it, but it's part of TTIP. Says if you renationalised your rail industry, say, you've got to pay the companies that own it now for all the millions and billions of pounds they could have made in profit over the time that they could have owned it after you've nationalised it. There's big attacks coming, either from the EU or from this government, and we're going to have to fight. So the whole time we're going to have this EU referendum, I reckon there's going to be big protests, big strikes against some of the attacks that we're facing, both from the EU and from our own government, in the form of austerity.
But austerity wasn't caused by the European Union, was it?
It was caused by the world economic crisis.
Yes, so how can we put that on the doorstep of the European Union?
Well, they're imposing austerity. They're imposing more cuts. Privatise your services is what they're saying. They're saying if countries want a loan, if countries can't afford, have had a hit by the crisis, they want a loan, then you've got to privatise your public services and we'll lend you money. Of course, the EU
From all what we believe, or we were made to understand,
they want to introduce
the government cannot run businesses unless they privatize it to the private entities to manage it well for the government. Isn't it true?
I don't think that private companies ever manage services well. They manage them to increase their profit margins as much as possible.
But they give you value for money.
Well, is that true with the privatised network, which costs us more now, with rising
it's value for
prices?
Money. How long would you wait for a train at Stratford?
Is that what happened with East Coast? This is not true. I think privatisation works terribly. We're privatising our NHS as we speak. And what's happening? Companies are making more and more money. The staff who are working there are having pay freezes and are paid less. And it's not working. We're seeing the crisis of PFI and the privatisation as we speak. I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist. I'm against privatisation. I think that we should have a nationalised rail industry and lots of other services, I think, should be nationalised and run for the benefit of people rather than for the profit of big business.
Mahmoud,
I agree with that. I agree with that. I thought it was unforgivable that the Conservative Party privatised the rail services, and then the Labour Party were too cowardly to say they would renationalise it, which would have made it impossible. And also we're looking at just as you've rightly said now, we're looking at the privatisation of the health service. Then there has to be the cost of running the health service, and on top of that, the cost of the profit. It can't be cheaper, and that's what we're heading towards.
Well, with all this privatization and nationalizing of state institutions, how well does that fit into in-out referendum of Europe that we're going to have in 2017?
I think that we are given, I don't know what others think, but we are now given a choice: either go along with a capitalist system or be punished for it. There's no reason on earth why we couldn't have a more socialist environment, and except for one thing, the dogma that now exists in the European Union is all one-sided. It's all about being a capitalist. You get punished for free market. You get punished if you don't open everything up to competition. It's insane.
Then that would be fantastic for the socialist persuasions to leave the European Union, so that the British government, the Westminster, can make laws best suited for the British people. Wouldn't that be great?
Well, I think that there is a strong argument to say that if you want any chance at all of having a more left-wing agenda, then number one, you're not going to get it from the European Union. Number two, you might not get it in the UK because the Labour Party and the left is in a mess. But there's more chance of it in an independent UK than there is in a UK which is told what to do by the European Union. I would strongly recommend the socialists do say that you guys don't think that the European Union is going to give a chance to the left-wing agenda. It just doesn't seem to want to do it. Even the left-wingers are right-wing in the European Parliament.
Well, Mahmoud, the Liberal Democrats, you are of the view that British in the European Union is best for the country. Now that we're going to have 2017, the referendum that will determine whether we leave with the European Union or we go out of the European Union. What is your take on that? Are we going to see Britain tomorrow? We wake up one day and the next day Britain is out of European Union. If you are going to Germany,
well, for my part and personally for me, I hope that's not true and we remain a part of Europe. Europe benefits us in many ways. It touches our lives. For example, if you want to go on holiday now, you don't need a visa. You go to so many countries without a visa. You just need the euro and you can travel most of Europe just on that. Except in Britain, you have to change it back to sterling because we haven't did that yet. So banks can cash in on the exchange rates and things like that. If you're using your telephone abroad, it's much cheaper now. It's roaming free. So there's all these benefits that touch your lives and make everyday difference to your life. And also, don't forget, there's many large multinational companies. Remember the referendum in Scotland where I said right close up to you what the people of Scotland will vote to stay with England because large multinational companies simply say, look, we can't do business here because you're not part of Britain anymore. And move on. This is exactly what happened. 1 week before the national referendum of Scotland, a lot of the companies actually stopped pumping oil, thinking what was going to happen and then change. Equally, say for example, Nissan, all these large companies that are here in this country, get a whiff. And don't forget, Deutsche Bank has already done it. They've already started looking at moving some days, making some days started in case Britain does go out. How much unemployment will we have? A lot of these large companies are here because we are a part of Europe. And Europe also benefits in the sense of workers' rights because you can think of yourself as an island or you can think of workers right across the globe.
Mahmoud, another question is, the ordinary British citizen did not ask the government or did not ask the Conservative Party to promise a referendum. But all the rhetorics that played into the hands of Nick Clegg and UKIP necessitated this referendum that in 2017 we must have a referendum to ask the people of Britain whether you want to leave, you want to be part of the European Union or out of it. I think the pressure was on Tony Blair, but he never gave a definitive answer for that they were going to have a referendum. When Ireland was doing the referendum, we never promised of a referendum, did we?
Well, I mean, you mentioned Tony Blair. You're talking about an individual that could crawl under a belly for snake, really. So let's not mention it there. In regards to us Liberal Democrats, we are a liberal party. We believe freedom of choice. We believe and the people should be given a choice. Although if it goes against us, it goes against us. But we have to set our stall and sell our idea. Just like in this election, we set our stall, we sold right, and we lost. It's something you have to accept. It's called democracy.
Helen, before I come to you, Lembit, you were in Parliament then when the pressure was on Tony Blair to set a date for a referendum to whether come out of the European Union or stay in, if my memory will serve me right. But he never did. Was that right?
He didn't want to do it. He had no intention of pulling out of the European Union. Any talk about a referendum, I don't think the Labour Party really had a policy for doing that, actually. Any talk about pulling out of the European Union was pretend. It was just not real. I do actually recall now the Liberal Democrats said that they would have a referendum on it, but that never happened. In fact, when the Lib Dems were put into the position of having to vote about it, it was another U-turn where the party was told to vote against having a referendum. It was actually about a big treaty which has been discussed as well. So once again, already we could see Nick Clegg showing a weakness of leadership all over the place. That's one of the things that the public don't like. They just don't like that kind of weakness, really. But this time we're going to have a referendum, there's no doubt. And this time it could be a no, but it will settle the matter for a generation.
Well, now the Prime Minister is fighting some of the members of his administration that anybody who would not support the Yes campaign better leave the government and then do his own thing. Is this a good statement made by the Prime Minister in support of his cause to negotiate and to get the referendum done?
It's all rubbish, basically. I've said this on your programme before, it's all rubbish, and I mean it. What this is about is the Prime Minister probably just having made a silly mistake in what he said about back me or I'll fire you, and then realising that just wasn't going to wash because people said, go on then, come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. And he goes, oh, that's not what I meant. I meant back me in the negotiations or I'll fire you. But that's silly because none of his people are disagreeing with the idea of him having the freedom to have a negotiation. They just want the freedom to vote no. So he's kind of all over the place with this because he never thought he was going to have to do it. I mean, it's slightly amusing to watch it from the outside, but it's not funny, really, because the future of the UK is at stake.
Well, Helen, you are a campaigner. So which of the would you answer? Is it yes to be part of the European Union or no to be out of European Union if you are out there campaigning come 2017 for this referendum? And based on what would you answer your questions?
Well, the Socialist Party, who I'm a member of, we haven't decided how much campaigning we'll be able to do. There are other battles that we're also taking place in. But we support leaving the EU on a socialist basis, is what we say. Because we think that the EU is a boss's club. As we've seen, Cameron's going round, as we speak, speaking to other countries about what's best for big business there and here for him and his friends. It's not representative of the needs.
To create employment in the United Kingdom. If businesses are coming here, your members will have a job to do.
I'll tell you where we could get some jobs for unemployed people. There's 100,000 jobs have gone in local councils because of the cuts that the Tories have made. To say that the Tories are interested in getting young people work, if they stopped making all the cuts that they've been making, people being made unemployment, then we wouldn't need them to go round and encourage businesses to come here, pay our young people £6.50 an hour to live in poverty and work for them. So we support leaving a boss's EU, but we support international solidarity of working class people around the world. There's been some really impressive struggles across Europe, especially in places like Spain and Greece, of people saying enough is enough, we've had enough austerity, we want to fight for something better, we want to fight for an alternative. And I want to link up with those people and spread that sort of movements across Europe against all austerity, against austerity here, but against everywhere where people are suffering austerity. And I don't think that the EU is ever going to do that. So you think that by leaving the EU we will end austerity? No, we'll have to still fight. No, I think we'll still have to fight. But we have to build that fight. And at the moment, the EU is doing nothing to enable that fight. It's imposing austerity.
The mother of austerity is in Greece, but they are not anticipating leaving the European Union.
Well, there's a move...
The situation that... I actually think Helen's right. I think you're right, Helen. The only chance of having a more left-wing agenda, I make no secret of the fact I'm pretty left-wing myself, the only chance is if you leave the European Union. But that's the core thing. That's not the main thing I'm in politics for. But if it was the main thing I was in politics for, I'd agree with what you're saying completely.
But would that solve our problem if we leave the European Union? If we are out of European Union, how can our problem be solved?
Not if we still have the Tories in power. But if we leave, if we campaign for an alternative, if there was,
what are the alternatives?
Going to be big movements.
What are the alternatives?
Well, I think we need a new party. That's why the Socialist Party is part of the Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition. We need to build a real working class alternative for people to vote for in elections. We need trade unions that are willing to go out and really organise and draw particularly really low paid, super exploited migrant workers into the trade union movement, making sure that everyone's getting a decent rate for the job and no one's getting...
How can you get a decent rate for a job when production is low?
Well, because we're fighting for a decent standard of living, and companies are not making no money. To say that companies are not making any money and they can't afford £10 an hour is absolute rubbish. Since the economic crisis hit in this country, the rich have gotten richer. Boardroom pay is up £700,000 since 2008, whereas the average pay of people like you and me is down £2,500. This country hasn't gotten poorer over the last 6-7 years. It's been 6 or 7 years of moving money from from the poorest in society to the rich in society, more tax evasion, more allowing people to get away with mass bonuses, the selling of the bank, the buying of the banks, nationalising the banks, but them still being allowed to pay huge bonuses to their friends. Let's not make no mistake, this country isn't poor. It's the 6th richest country in the world. To say that we've got all these companies that don't have any money and have to pay their workers £6.50 to live in poverty is wrong, and we should be fighting them for a decent standard of living for everyone.
The corporations and the bosses of the multinational organizations are saying that if Britain is out of European Union, that will affect the country more, and the country will be worse than being part of the European Union. Now that Helen is saying that yes, if we leave European Union, we'll be able to pay our workers well, the jobs here will be done properly. Is this feasible?
It is feasible. There could be. I'll explain how. It liberates us from some of the restrictions, part of the capitalist system, which Helen doesn't like, and some of the rules which require everything to be in the competitive sphere, everything to be open to contracting out and everything else. That goes. There will be other problems. We will probably have to pay some sort of import taxes to the rest of the European Union. But ultimately, it's not clear-cut. This is the thing. The big businesses, they of course want nothing to change. It's easier for them if everything stays as it is. But it's down to an ideological question. As I say, Helen's political agenda is slightly different to mine, but essentially, if I had Helen's agenda, I would be saying the same thing. There is no prospect of a left-wing agenda. There is no prospect of a reduction in austerity in this country if we can get punished by the European Union for doing it. The only chance of having a more left-wing economic ideology, and I'm actually into libertarianism, I'm more into the social agenda than the economic agenda, but the only way to have a left-wing economic agenda in any country which is in the European Union is to not be in the European Union. I think that Greece is proving that.
Now, most of the European Union states are now facing austerity. So should we say that before the states coming together has imposed some form of hardship to its members, or what?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, okay. We're getting into complicated economics now, but in simple terms, we can talk about the history of the European Union, and that is actually relevant, but cutting that out, because we've only got a few minutes, it seems to me that what's happened, the big countries are imposing their ideology on the small countries. Germany essentially rules the European Union. Germany is a capitalist system set up by the West after World War II. And Germany tells Greece what to do, and the Greece doesn't like it. Unfortunately, the UK gets told to some extent what to do as well. Now, from my point of view, my agenda, my problem is that we get all this overbearing, authoritarian rubbish. Let's say, for example, with motorcycles, they wanted to ban any vehicle with any motorcycle, not car, any motorcycle with an engine bigger than 100 horsepower. They wanted to make it mandatory to wear high-vis jackets. They wanted to create stupid new limitations on road safety, which didn't really do any good for road safety.
Wouldn't that be good for the rider to wear the high-vis jacket to protect him or to make him visible on the road?
There's some evidence to suggest that actually a high-vis jacket, for psychological reasons, makes the rider less obvious to a driver. It's actually
on this note, Limpid, we thank you very much for your time with us on Voice of Africa Radio.
All right, always a pleasure.
And hopefully next week we would want to see you live in the studio and talk about important issues that really matter most.
I will. I'll come in. You know I like coming there. I will come and see you.
Thank you very much for your time with us on Voice of Africa Radio. Well, Mahmoud, you are pro-European Union, but be snappy, and we go to.
I think we're all looking at the same sort of goal. It's just that my party and I personally believe we just should take a different direction. We live in a very sort of economical world where the world trades very quickly. I think we're better off in Europe. Instead of letting the capitalists have their way in Europe, We should fight the capitalists, the workers should unite, libertarians should unite, and we should fight our corner in Europe, not out of Europe. We must stand not only for the workers of Britain, the rights of British citizens, but also for the Greeks, for the French, for the Germans, for the Italians, all of those united together, working to make a stronger and better Europe for everyone.
Isai, Tamil solidarity. European Union, I don't think you would be much interested in. Are you much interested in being part of the? All right, if you are part of, if you are much interested in it, then we will be talking about the migrants dying on the sea, seeing as they are fleeing from persecution and economic hardship in their own countries. But today the time wouldn't allow us. We don't have much time, so be snappy.
Before I touch on the Europe, or just on Janahan, there is a petition on Tamil Solidarity website that anyone listening, please do go and show your support, because this young boy is his life is in danger. But in terms of EU, I'll keep it very brief and very short. I agree with Helen in the sense that EU is a boss's club, and we need to get out of it. And staying inside of it's not going to help the working class get anything better out of it in the long run. So we do need to get out of it. That's what my position was.
Helen?
Yeah, I think
you would be campaigning alongside Nigel Farage to get Britain out of the EU.
No, because he's no socialist. I'm going to be campaigning just like in Scotland.
We have to
just
have
like
a coalition.
In Scotland during the referendum, there was two people. There was a socialist campaigning each way, and there was other people. I think actually, socialists campaigning for a no will be a breath of fresh air to the anti-immigration sentiment of UKIP, but also the pro-austerity sentiment from the Tories, the Lib Dems, Labour and UKIP. We're going to be fighting against austerity and for a decent standard of living for all workers.
Well, I thank you very much for your time with us on Voice of Africa Radio. Helen Petersen, Isai and Mahmoud Faiz, Liberal Democrat, former MP, and Limbedo Peck. Thank you, and catch us same time next week on Voice of Africa Radio.
News.